Sages Stories.
Welcome to today's episode of Sages Stories, the official podcast of SAGES, the Society of American Gastrointestinal and Endoscopic Surgeons. Please make sure to hit the like button and subscribe so you can stay up to date with our most recent episode. And enjoy the show.
Well, welcome to episode 27 of Sages Stories, where we shine the light on some of Sage's most impactful leaders. I'm your co-host, Dr. Kevin El-Hayek from Cleveland, Ohio. Today, we will get the opportunity to invite back several past SAGES presidents as we discuss their specific pathway to leadership and gain key insights into their success. And I'm joined today by our new co-host.
Hello, everyone. I'm your new co-host, Dr. Jenny Shao, coming to you from Ann Arbor, Michigan. I'm really excited to be here today for the start of this new season and to interview these amazing guests. They've all been featured on our podcast in the past, so be sure to check out their in-depth interviews in our previous episodes.
And before we start, I would like to take a moment to honor the life of one of our SAGES leaders who recently passed away. Of course, I'm speaking about Dr. George Bursey, who lived to a mature age, as he would say, of 103. He was an inspiration to everyone on this episode and so many others, and he will be sorely missed. For me, I will always remember him for his kindness, his hospitality, and specifically, I learned from him that just because you are short, it doesn't mean you can't be a giant. And he was certainly a giant on whose shoulders many of us have stood. For those of you who would like to hear from him in his own words, I invite you to check out episode 4, when I had the chance to interview him with Sharon Tofai in his home in Los Angeles. It was truly an inspirational SAGES Stories, and he was inspirational SAGES leader. Here's to a life well lived. Today, we have Drs. Hoarcio Asbun, Liane Feldman, John Mellinger, and Pat Sylla on the show. 4 guests, another first for the podcast. And so to start, maybe each of you could fill in since your last podcast. So we can start with Hoarcio, who was actually episode 1, all the way back in August of 2021 to kick things off. So why don't you give us a little update on what's happened since then, Hoarcio?
Well, what has happened since then is I have seen the evolution of this podcast, and I have pleasantly enjoyed almost every single episode. And I want to congratulate all of you and for the job you have done. It has been very interesting to hear different aspects of SAGES, as well as the leadership and all the people you have interviewed. Then thank you for having me again. And let's start with the fun show that you have tonight. We are 4 of us, and I cannot wait to hear from everybody.
I can't wait either. I think it's going to be an amazing episode. And just to kind of continue with a little bit of our updates, what about you, Liane? So your episode followed directly after Hoarcio's, also in 2021. What have you been up to since then?
It seems like such a long time ago somehow. It's 26 episodes ago, or my math might be 25 episodes ago. I was the SAGES president for a year, then, past president. So that's a change for sure. Moving more into the watching the next presidents do great work and the members of the exec. And here at home, I'm in the same position that I was back then. Kids have gotten older. That's the best way to mark time, I think. They're in different phases than they were a few years ago. And I think that's probably the most striking. We never get older, but of course somehow the kids do.
That is for sure. I would totally agree with that. John, you were following, and I think you've had some updates on your end. I'm sure some listeners would appreciate to hear those. So if you don't mind sharing a little updates since your episode.
Well, thanks. Thank you, Kevin and Jenny. And it's great to be with the others on the call, dear friends. And I haven't seen any of them actually in the last few months. So it's great to get to see you all tonight. My main things since that podcast were finishing out my service with the ABS and serving on exec during Pat's presidency year, which was another real joy. And just to see her work and her vision for the organization like the others on the call. And then I officially retired July 1 from that role. So we've been leaning into grandchildren time and more reflective time, more reading time for things other than medicine. So it's been a pretty rich season thus far.
Yeah, I love that. I feel like sometimes as surgeons, we forget to sort of live our other lives, but I love hearing that you're really taking full advantage of your retirement, and it's so well deserved. And so last but not least is Pat Sylla, who just finished her tenure as president this past year, and who we heard from in episode 9, just a little over 2 years ago.
Yeah, so I mean, I had an amazing year as SAGES president, and I would say since then, it's just been, catching up with things and watching all the things that all these former presidents put in motion at SAGES, and making sure things get done, and that our next generation of leaders are empowered to continue this amazing work. So it's been just amazing to see them continue the mission and develop new initiatives. And on a personal front, it's been really busy, and New York City doesn't rest. I mean, we've been hit with so many crises, health system wise, consolidations. So it's just busy kind of getting patients through and making sure everybody's okay and moving forward.
That's awesome. Well, as mentioned, you all represent the recent past presidents of SAGES, and certainly I think we need to tip our hats to you all for not shutting SAGES stories down at any point during your tenures. And because as they say in business, it's always nice to have a plan B. And so if surgery didn't pan out for us, I was hoping that maybe this side gig could potentially become our main gig.
Well, as the newcomer to this, I'd like to add my gratitude so they can start honing my podcast skills as well. Hopefully this will be the start of many more years to come.
Yeah, I think everyone realizes how good you're going to be after that last podcast, Jen.
Yeah, well, I do love chatting and getting to know people, so hopefully this will come just as easily. It really has been a dream of mine to be on Spotify, so that's definitely a check off the bucket list.
Well, thanks for updating us on all your lives. It's been fun to see the society flourish, and each of us that you handed the reins to the next ones. The continuity of leadership in SAGES is really a pillar of the organization, which brings us to our main topic for this evening. And the name of the podcast episode, which Jenny came up with, by the way, maybe with some help from ChatGPT. You all ready to hear the episode name?
Yeah,
I see heads nodding.
Let's hear it.
It's called Presidential Surgery: Cutting Through History. Pretty good, right? I know ChatGPT does have some good names. And who doesn't love a good surgery pun?
Yeah, I think it's super fitting, Jenny, that you launch your podcast career with this episode, given your involvement in the Fundamentals of Leadership Development course, which was just recently launched. And so why don't you kick things off with the first questions?
Yeah, I'd be happy to. So really going to start with the tough questions, maybe take some inspiration from the recent presidential debates, grill you all on some national policies and foreign affairs as well. But just kidding aside, as the co-host and the SAGES member, I'd really like to take this opportunity to focus on the pathway that each of you took to becoming a SAGES president. I know that many of you have, in each of your individual stories, have already touched on this in terms of your early careers and influences. But for those listeners out there that may aspire to be president of SAGES one day, I wanted to ask if there were any specific steps or roles that you felt that you held in your careers or within SAGES that really helped you prepare for the transition to being president.
not all at once as you contemplate. So we may have to call on folks as you.
We don't like interrupting each other.
No, I know that's one thing that you clearly. So maybe we'll just start with Liane, since you're already unmuted there.
Honestly, don't know how I became the president of SAGES. I mean, I know how I became the president of SAGES once I was on the exec, but I don't really know how I got to be on the exec. But if I look back, if I think what are some meaningful steps, I think part of it was having opportunities to have roles in relatively high visibility projects. That gives you the opportunity to present to the board, to lead a task force. And if anything, I would say my opportunities at SAGES were very helpful in other leadership opportunities that I was offered or opportunities that came outside of SAGES. So I would say it's almost the other way around. SAGES really gave me the opportunity to think about deliverables, think about things strategically, think about what steps you need to get to a goal, think about budget, finance. So I think once I had those opportunities, it really has helped me in my other roles, here at home. And I'm very grateful to SAGES for that. I think that's one of, especially as a younger person early in career, to have those opportunities to speak to the board, to speak to incredible leaders like we see here, and then have the opportunity to deliver, I think is, for me, was a unique opportunity that I got from SAGES.
How about you, Pat?
I second that 100%. I learned from giants like Liane, and I've been, I think one key thing was to also watch these amazing leaders and learn from them. And I think for me, it's kind of funny. I think I was part of SAGES for some time, but I think a big break for me was actually my first committee was membership. And then very quickly, I had the opportunity to become a member of the Conflict of Interest Task Force in the early days, when conflict of interest and financial relationships and what it meant in terms of developing educational materials, society started to make have a significant impact, and we needed to be more mindful. And then I kind of rose up to leadership under, a lot of the members kind of pushed me forward, and I kind of took a more of a leadership role on that committee. And it wasn't a particularly high profile committee back then. It was actually considered to be like a difficult committee to be on, because we had to kind of deal with people's financial disclosures and reconcile potential conflict of interest. So it was kind of like a grueling process, but I think it made an impression, from just, developing the skill set and the diplomatic skills to kind of manage that. And I think, you kind of make an impression in terms of people kind of, see you as a potential leader. And it really gave me my big break after, moving on to colorectal committee and other committees. I think it's really important to take every job in these societies very seriously and really give it all you have. I think you start, kind of demonstrating leadership skills that people will start to notice, and then you get an opportunity to do something else that will be really impactful for the society, just like Liane said. And then you start developing your skill sets, and your value to the society starts to rise, and people pay notice. And the best part about the society is people come up to you and support you and encourage you along the way. I cannot tell you how many people, including online, have come to me and said, keep it up. You're doing great. People are noticing you. We are seeing you, Pat, keep going. And these encouragements were so important throughout my trajectory at SAGES. And eventually, people started to even coach me and say, if you're going to get to the next step, I would like you to do this, a little bit more of that. And I still remember Hoarcio coming to me and say, Pat, you're a doer, but I need you to kind of learn to kind of manage teams a little bit better and be more savvy and learn the skill, which is really important to really bring other people's up. It's really important for the society to see that a leader can also, bring other people up, and making sure you're really good at leading teams and doing these things. So this growth was essential. To be able to grow, through these membership and this advice was critical. So this has really been part of my journey to presidency. work of a village. I stand on the shoulders of giants.
Yeah, I definitely echo that too. I feel like just being in Sages for a short of a time is I've definitely noted the support and people, giving you that feedback and telling you you've done a great job. I feel like Pat, you have been one of those people for me. So I really feel like you've been able to pass that along as well. What about you, Horacio?
Well, obviously, I echo all the things that have been said by Pat and Liane. I think it's pretty important to understand, at least in my experience, for sages, do things because you want to do them well, not because you want to climb and be a president or be on the executive committee. And above all, don't feel entitled. We have seen through the years a lot of people that feel that they have to be, and the reality is some they do, some they don't. Just be honest with yourself, and if you really want to be a leader, you have to do what it has been explained here. Do your task. Try to choose meaningful projects that are going to give you visibility, but not because they're going to give you visibility, but because they make a difference. Then, if you're going to do something, do it the best you can, as Pat said, and not because it's going to advance you, but just because you really want to do that job well. If one day you become a chairman, don't think, okay, if I'm a chairman for 5 years, I can be on the exec. No, just be a chairman to be a chairman and bring that committee to whatever is the best that you can do. What they have said about people encouraging you, I think it's very important to point that out, at least from my perspective. There's a lot of people that have had mentors, even on this call, that have been past leaders of SAGES. Then there's this concept that there's a lot of nepotism and that people help each other. That has not been my experience. I had no mentors that brought me to SAGES other than Eddie Joe Reddick telling me, this is a fun group of people, and I think you're going to really enjoy. And for those that don't know who Eddie Joe Reddick is, he's responsible for the laparoscopic revolution in the United States, along, with Douglas Olson. Then he told me when I was in my early 30s, said, listen, I mean, you're the type of guy that's going to enjoy this society. And certainly, I stuck with it since then. And it is because of that, because I realized that if I work well on something, I'm having fun, I'm going to be noticed. And it doesn't matter that I was not coming at that time from a big academic place. It didn't matter that I had no mentor of mine or academic mind that had been president of SAGES or leadership of SAGES. And that actually gave me an advantage. Rather than having a single mentor through which I would have to listen and do what that mentor, he or she, tells me, I could just observe how all the leaders were and what they did and be able to learn from them. Then I do believe SAGES is one of the few societies that you can become president if you started without anybody know you. And that has been my experience. And if I haven't been able to do it, I think a lot of people can do it. You just need to make sure that you understand you're going to have to work hard, but at the same time, you're going to work hard on projects that are fun and with people that are incredibly fun and wonderful. I agree with Liane, and with this, I'm going to finish. A lot of people, and the question was, what leadership skills you had that outside that help you become president of SAGES? To me, has been the contrary. And I just want to emphasize what Liane said. I learned so much on SAGES that has helped me tremendously on my professional life outside SAGES.
I love
That's
that. I'm
fantastic.
feeling so inspired already. This is going to be one of the best podcasts ever. John, any last minute thoughts?
You know what? I was jotting a few thoughts down as I was listening, and I really have nothing to say that hasn't been said. Excellent comments and insights as usual from the other three. I would summarize in my own words some of the things I heard. Don't seek a position, seek to be of influence for good. I think all of us found it surprising to get a call, would you serve on exec? Found it even more surprising to get a call, we'd like you to consider serving as the next president. And I think that's because, and these three were all good examples for me of this, but I think all the presidents I got to work around were good examples of trying to do the right thing for the good of the society, the good of surgeons, ultimately the good of patients. And having your motives grounded that way, I think, trickles through to the kind of performance that can lead to opportunities. But we would also all say that there are many, I would certainly say that there are many people in SAGES worthy of being president, more so than me. I got the opportunity. So I think you need to be careful, and Horacio, I think, alluded to this, that not getting that role doesn't mean you aren't doing that kind of service. It just means there's only a few that will get that opportunity, but all of us can contribute that way, and that's what makes the society great. I think another couple of thoughts that came to mind were one of my residents said years ago to me, the world belongs to those who show up. And on my podcast, I talked about be a Joe, not a John, alluding to Joe Beisky, who she and I were on our first SAGES committee. We were both new members, fresh out of fellowship. We were on this committee together. Joe was president 10 or 15 years before me. And as I look back on it, I think part of it was when I showed up at that committee, I was in this mindset of, this isn't the committee I want to serve on. I hope they'll put me on some other committee soon. Joe just showed up and did the work happily. And that's the way to show up. Whatever opportunity you're given, make something of that. And then I think the last thing is not to try to fit your skills into somebody else's mold, but say, what's the contribution I can make that's genuine, that's, Horacio alluded to this, that's or you did, Jenny, in your feedback to Horacio. It's kind of, where's integrity for me as a member of the society? Where am I showing up as who I really am? And let that contribution be the one you make. There's a great quote I like on that theme. I'll finish my comments with this so others can speak more, but Frederick Buechner said, where your passions and the world's needs intersect, that might be your calling. So, the things you're passionate about and SAGES could benefit from, just invest yourself there and opportunities will come.
See, this
That's
is what
great.
I miss from, John, like I could just listen to you, talk all day. I was so lucky to have those years in time with you, John. I'm really sorry to interrupt, but
No, that's
we're all just
fantastic.
sitting here like soaking it in,
You're
Yeah, he gives a
absolutely
lot
right.
of good nuggets to jot down.
Yes, Liane, you're absolutely right. And I would say you're not interrupting, because that's what I want to say too. John always said better what is in my brain than what I can say. Then, John, yet one more time, thank you. We have been so fortunate to work together for so many years with the people that are in this podcast, and so many others. I mean, that's the other thing. My experience has been, you hear, oh, SAGES is a family, and you sit on the auditorium on your early years, and the president says, oh, this has been my family, and they show my professional family, they show the executive committee, but it really is, because we get to know each other in a way that, at least in my experience, the years that I have been on exec committee has been so wonderful to learn from each other, like we're doing on this podcast. We learn from each other. And those are the things that you apply to your work and to life. Somehow SAGES has a way to take the high road in the majority of the cases. I mean, I'm not saying it's heaven or everything is perfect, but I'm saying that as good as it could be a surgical society, this is the one that I feel you can do a lot more with the passions you have. And I have been in great societies. I mean, in my own specialty, AHPBA, et cetera, are fantastic societies too. But what I have learned the most because of interacting with the people is this society.
So each sort of alluded to somewhat of the pathway and the process, but I think it might be a good opportunity to get some more clarity behind, that what is that process? How does that process play out for each of you, becoming president? So more like the logistical part of it. John?
I think I'll be riffing off things others have said, but I think showing up when you're given an opportunity to serve on a committee or to write something, to do something that's potentially of substance for the society, maybe even bringing your own idea forward. I watched some very young people in the society, much younger than certainly I was when I started to do more things, come forward with, in this age of artificial intelligence and surgical data science. We have some fairly young people that are wonderkinds in their knowledge in some of these areas and their expertise. And we have people like the others on this call that do a great job of elevating young people and recognizing those skills and giving them responsibility and mentoring and coaching them in that. So I would say, don't be afraid to bring forth your own idea, but if you're given any opportunity, show up, invest, and then you'll form relationships like you hear us talking about with one another on this call that end up being incredibly enriching, not just in your journey with Sages, but in all of life. And by making those kind of investments, I think people will, to describe the pathway, Kevin, I think it goes from, here's somebody who shows up, and when we send out an email asking everybody on the committee to chime in or to take a piece of this, they do it, and they do it efficiently. And pretty soon the staffer for that committee is saying, this person really is doing the work, and they're making a contribution. Well, before long, they'll be asked to be a co-chair. And not long after that, perhaps a chair. And when you start chairing a committee, now you're getting the, I think Liane alluded to this, you're getting the kind of opportunities to interface with the leadership that starts to make you known and your contributions known. And you get asked perhaps to be on a podium or to help write a review article. And all these things become ways of sort of building your resume within the society. And those recognitions then lead to the kind of things that ultimately culminated in the comments some of us made about, after serving perhaps on the board, reporting to the board as a committee chair, then maybe the opportunity arising to serve on exec. And that's made through a nominating committee, and maybe others, so I don't talk too much here, just can describe that process. But I think that's the general pathway most of us find ourselves on.
Yeah, I think that's super helpful because I think, it's not really written down anywhere. So just to have you describe that, I think is really helpful for all of our listeners out there. And just to switch gears a little bit, all of you have done such amazing things as past presidents, from navigating challenges in a pandemic to focusing on diversity, sustainability, and patient-centered care. Can you guys talk a little bit more about how you figured out what the primary goal or focus of your presidency was going to be? How did you decide that that was what you were going to focus on for your presidential year?
Maybe
Well,
Pat, why don't you take it?
yeah, that's a really good question. I think, I mean, for this, it's really the vision and the magic and leadership of Sally Matthews, who really prepares the incoming president early. So the process, because you're on the exec, so you kind of know how things work. But very early on, she already engages you with thinking and reflecting through the things that you may want to set in motion during your presidency. And that's really important, for her to map that out, because if there's any initiative that requires some work, investment, time, person, organizing a new committee or task force that may require some resources, making a specific request to the Research Foundation to fund, a particular initiative, she needs to plan that out for the budget. So that needs to be discussed early on. So we have this, pretty intense meeting where you meet with usually it's the president-elect and the past president get together, and kind of it's a wonderful opportunity to kind of review, how the year went, how things are going, and then what do you want to do next. So there's a continuity also in the project. And also the great part about this is also asking the president that's going out is, what do you want to continue doing? And that's really important. What initiatives do you feel like you want to continue or continue to lead? And so that is really that transition meeting is one of the highlights of the year. I don't know if Liane wants to add to that process.
No, I think that's exactly right. And it's, the having Sally and the SAGES staff as the continuity, I think really, really are hugely helpful. I think there's always a balance, the presidency, it's 1 year, it's a very intense year. And there's a balance between trying to get as much as you can get done with the things that you think are important, and you do spend your time on the exec a few years leading up to it, sort of thinking how you're given this amazing platform, how are you going to, make the most of that platform, bringing your own experiences and perspectives to that platform. So it's a little bit daunting, and it goes by very fast, but at the same time, there's so many incredible projects that are already ongoing, and you don't want to, you want those things to flourish as well. So, there is that principle of don't just do something, stand there. So you have to have also not to just have frenetic activity for frenetic activity's sake. So I think there's a balance.
No Brownian motion.
Pardon?
No Brownian motion.
Right. I mean, it should. So I think there's that balance of one thing, and I think it was mentioned, of being on the exec and seeing, the 40 some committees, the amazing work that's being done, and wanting to support that and your colleagues' visions for what you have seen on the exec. You want that to continue. And at the same time, you have the opportunity to bring perhaps something of your own unique perspective or interest that may resonate as well. And it's a balance, because I think John, may have been John who, there was I forget how you put it exactly, but we're always adding, but there's also a huge value in subtracting, so that we have the energy to bring to bear. Like Pat and sustainability, obviously that's a huge issue. And, that's the kind of thing that SAGES has to be involved in. And so there are things like that come up, but you do have to think as stewards as well. And I think part of it is, and this may also be something that John teaches, is, being a good ancestor. We benefited from so much, and in the pandemic we saw this. It was a difficult time, obviously, but we came through the pandemic, even, with the financial implications that all societies felt, but we were in a good position because of having good ancestors. So you also, of course, want to be mindful of being that good ancestor.
Yeah, and I respected a lot when you said, okay, when there's no need for more new projects. I mean, and John, I think you also did that just to solidify the projects that are there, because if not, each president comes with a project, and then where do we put our focus on? I do feel you were talking about the path. It's interesting because naturally it's like it should be 1 plus, if you do 1 plus 1, this should be 2. If you do 1 plus 1 plus 1, then you should be in the exec if you do it. But things are not like that because of two aspects. One, I believe leadership is fluid, and the needs vary. Not only that, but there is, as John explained, so many capable people within SAGES that I can bet that I speak for all 4 of us to say we did not have a clue how difficult is to choose who is going to come to the board or who is going to come to the exec, because there's so many people that one should say, well, it's easy, we have plenty of candidates. Well, that's if it is a regular job. But on this, we know there's multiple people that deserves it. Then the difficulty become, who are we going to say no? And how are we going to keep those people engaged? And you don't get to realize that until you're very advanced within the leadership. And I don't know about the rest, but even after 6 or 7 years on the exec, I didn't imagine what it is to be the president until you are the president, because then you can see all what SAGES does. On the exec, you have a very good idea, but as a president, you need to know very well and understand and solve the problems of everything that, not solve the problems, but assist in solving the problems. Then it is a humble experience. And I feel that a lot of presidents think, how in the heck I became a president? Is what John said, I mean, there's so many good people. And I have learned so much from prior presidents that you really feel good to be among that group. And that by itself, the majority of us make us more humble than even before we were president, just to know that we have that responsibility.
Yeah, I wanna push that and maybe have you all reflect on your time now that it's passed and you've all completed that very busy and packed year. When you think back, and maybe you already know the answer, maybe you need a moment to think about it, but what would you consider was the most significant achievement, memorable moment, or accomplishment that really stands out when you think back on your year?
Yeah, we're really doing the tough questions tonight.
I'll make an observation. As I look at the other three folks, a principle from, our political experience, what really defines a presidency in politics is often the unexpected things that come up on their watch and how they respond to them. So I'm going to pick on Hoarcio as an example, but I could think of similar things that both Liane and Pat navigated. But so Hoarcio, the COVID shutdown happens and he rallies. Hoarcio, was it over 100 international surgeons? I can't remember the number, but you very rapidly built this group of people and in a series of calls generated a working document that became the template that it got downloaded over 100,000 times in the space of just a few months. It became the working document that surgery worldwide was using to figure out how to govern the challenge of limited OR time and resources under the threat of the pandemic, how to deal with and prioritize elective surgical caseloads and so forth. I'm sure Hoarcio didn't sit down at the start of his presidency and say, I think this is what my presidency will be about, but talk about a legacy contribution. So I think a big part is the unexpected things and pressures. I could talk about Pat and the sustainability thing. I'll let her do that, but I'll give you one hint I had about that before Pat leaned into it so effectively for us. As we got into planning the retreat my year, we realized that finances were tighter post-pandemic. Our income from meetings, et cetera, had diminished. Industry resources were not what they had once been, and so forth. Anyway, long story short, we ended up structuring that retreat without a facilitator other than myself to save money. I learned a ton from that. And we made the focus, Liane alluded to this, not just what do we want to add, but what can we subtract? What are the things we want to sustain? What are the things we want to quit so we can make room for new things? What are the new things we should be adding to keep us growing? And that was a highlight for me, not because of what I did, but because in a limited resource setting, we found a way due to the horsepower of the people in the room that gathered for that retreat to come up with some helpful ideas. And one of them was to invite Pat to forecast a little bit about what she was thinking of ahead where she took us to a whole new level on those fronts. So I would say that some of the most memorable things as I see them are the things you don't anticipate or are forced into, but weren't part of what you would have ideally chosen to do.
That's a perfect segue, because then I don't have to speak about this, because John just covered that, and I will just say a couple of words about Liane, for example, and Liane and the process we went through, and the unexpected, obviously, and terrifying and devastating event that happened in the US with the death of, or the murder of George Floyd, I should say, and the profound repercussions that had on our society, but especially, on all our members. And so Liane really, guided us through that process, and we ended up with this, really intense deep dive into understanding our governance, our culture, our identity, what that meant to us, how to embed diversity better in everything we do. And that legacy goes on. And I think that was incredibly impactful. It was extremely inspiring to me, because we're all at a loss in terms of what to do. And obviously reflecting on, the inequities and the systemic racism in our country. And so it was really not just, talking about it and debriefing. And it was really, what do we do as a society, and how do we make diversity front and center? And how do we even, look at what we've done before, and reflect on how we can move forward and do better. And this is going on. And throughout my presidency, her leadership and what she's accomplished, kind of resonated throughout the entire year. And I think you saw from my keynote, we spend a lot of time reflecting on how we do better, how we promote our underrepresented minorities, how do we address, some of the disparities that we have within our organization and elsewhere in our own institutions. And the work goes on. This is obviously just the beginning. And Jenny Shao knows that very well, because she's, this is not surprise that she's the chair of our DLPD committee, which we're very proud of. But the work she's done in that space has been incredibly important. And she's really leading us, in that next phase of being more proactive. And especially the political environment has been brutal. We're starting to see now statistics coming from the Supreme Court reversal of race-conscious college admissions, which will have an impact on medical schools and residency and training. And so we're going to have even deepening gaps throughout, and we need to stay ahead of these and be very active and collaborate with our other societies. And we have lots of amazing other societies we can partner with to develop a strategy to promote our vulnerable residents, especially in faculty. So that's Liane. I'll stop there, because I could go on for another hour. But and then John, I think one of the most impactful things for John, which also influenced me during my residency, is the work he did on the ground with COSEXA, and really looking at global surgery and developing FLS, and really promoting FLS training and training of laparoscopy in low and middle income countries. And he had an enormous impact on how SAGES, reflects on our mission in the world of training surgeons who just don't have the access. So that was incredibly inspiring, and we continue to put resources, thanks to John, and he's really ringing the alarm of, we need to continue this work. This is a priority for our society. So, yeah.
I like that you've all changed the question, and you're sharing the most impactful thing from the other president. I think that's a very servant leadership type of change. You're not answering the question, and it fits with the way our presidential debates have been going too. Is just don't answer the question, just take it wherever you want to take it. I mean, this is perfect. We're all used to this by now. No, I love it though. So continue.
I really do love these answers, though, because I feel like it's very much in line with how I feel about SAGES, in which people just feel so passionate to be here. And, it's just such a great community of people who support each other, and just seeing you guys support each other, even like in answering questions, is really great. So I absolutely love that. Horacio, I think maybe you were going to say something too.
Well, I just want to emphasize that I see this as a really positive and demonstrative of what SAGES is. You asked what's the most significant thing in your presidency, and everybody else said what was significant in someone else's presidency, not talking about what you have done. And that by itself speaks volumes about what the society leadership is. I also want to say that, yes, when you become a president, there's a lot of things that are credited to you, and that is great. But the reality is, it's because of what the members of the society and the leaders of the society are. In my case, as it has been alleged already, I was facing, and taking over in March, April of 2020. And COVID was there. And the first feeling is, what am I going to do to be able to keep this society alive? And then it hit me. It's not me the one that has to do. I just have to facilitate the leadership doing it. And that's what it was. There's so much talent within the leadership that the important thing was just to facilitate and allow other people to do what they are capable of doing. And that's how we survived all of that time. And yes, it was unexpected, as John said, but with the group of leaders in the executive committee, the past president, at the time Rory, that had started already the work really hard on the first 2 months of COVID, we were well set to be able to survive it. Then yes, I think the achievements that one obtains and the accomplishments are because of the people that surrounds us. And that's the definition, right? You just said, Kevin, the servant leaders, right? That this is where you learn it. And that helps you in any other position. As a chairman of surgery, I have used the things that I have learned from SAGES. And I know I'm being very repetitive, but it's just to be able to emphasize what brings you to work on a society like this.
And last but not least, Liane.
No, I think I'll leave it there. I think that's where I think everybody has said really expressed my feelings as well. And I think I think I'll just leave it there.
I think these are all really great thoughts, and I'm just feel very lucky to be here soaking up all this really sage advice on leadership and what it means to be passionate about something and to lead with humility. So really enjoyed everyone's responses and answers. And so I guess looking into the future, what do you think your thoughts are on the role or the impact of SAGES or professional societies in advancing the field of surgery? What role do you think SAGES has yet to play?
I can start that one off. I think there's been a lot of hand wringing and ink spilled about the future of surgical societies. I mean, we've gone through many times where we worry about what's the meeting going to be like in the future, and or industry wants to support the meetings, or industry doesn't want to support the meetings, or this is how many booths, and SAGES works so hard. I mean, to make sure that that we interact appropriately, that we with our industry partners and so forth. So I'm trying to minimize any of that, but I think what it comes down to, and this is for me, one of the big lessons of the pandemic was, we did a lot of work on Zoom during the pandemic, some of it really impactful. But the minute we could get back together again in person, there's nothing that replaces that. So it's the community and that sense of belonging to something. And to me, I really do think that and I think that if we don't encourage our residents, trainees, fellows to get involved in SAGES or in whatever surgical society where you feel at home, you're missing what for me was such a big, joyful part of my professional career. Just the friendships, like all of you here, as well as the SAGES staff who are not, we don't see their pictures, but I mean, they've turned off their camera, but I mean, these have become very good friends of mine, people I rely on for advice, people I look forward to seeing. I've met their families. I think it's just without that, I would have been missing something joyful in my surgical professional career. So I think that's what it comes down to, really. These are just a community of people all of us have different specialties. You can see here, it's interesting, right? We all have pretty much different specialties, or we had different specialties. But we're somehow united by something about SAGES, whether that's improving recovery for patients, whether that's, whether that's a love of technology or innovation or teaching or something, or just watching videos. There's something special that I got personally from SAGES, continue to get, that I want people I work with to get that same feeling. And that extra something, it's just an extra part of your professional life. That's a gift. So that's what I think the future, the present, the past of these societies are. And I think that was one of the lessons for me of the pandemic, that's what I really missed, was just seeing people in person, and the friendships and the sense of community.
What Liane is talking is about fun, and that's a core value in our society. And I would like to speak and be able to express and manifest how wonderful it is. But hey, let's get John to talk about it. I told you, John, you always can speak what's in my brain better than what I can do myself. Then John, talk about the fun and the camaraderie we have in the society.
Well, I would again point to Liane and Hoarcio for the Reimagining the Profession of Surgery task force and the work they've done to help us rethink how to orient our energies, not to more resilience and coping mechanisms, but celebrating and leveraging the things that are like what Liane was talking about, this sense of I'm part of a community that sustains me. And I guess I would just say, we are all deeply formed through our training process to do what we do in surgery. We spend years of our lives, even more than the chronological years, because of the amount of time we invest compared to an average person in another line of work. And unfortunately, some of that formation, I think, tends to make us, despite the noble aspirations of our profession, ruggedly individualistic, competitive, and ultimately self-damaging. And what I found in SAGES, and I know I speak for all the others on the call, was, I love Liane's word, was this community of people that had all done that, but had found a way to truly joyfully work together, solving problems, coming up with solutions, looking ahead and seeing things that we were going to need before the rest of the profession seemed to do it, and having fun leaning into that. SAGES did a really good job of defining the realities of our lives and then asking, how can we work together to do better? And again, with an ultimate focus, not just on ourselves, but the people we serve, our patients. And to have a professional family like that is, I think, an absolutely necessary sustaining influence for a career. And I think all four of us would say that, again, Liane's word, community, that's what SAGES has been for us.
Well, I know we're going to let Pat talk too, but before she does, I just want to highlight how this plays out in real time. As everyone can imagine, getting this high caliber of a group of people together is no easy task, and we went through multiple rounds to schedule it, and ultimately, due to a patient concern on our initial scheduled call, I had to ask that it get rescheduled. And I think the response that I got from each surgeon individually was, hope your patient's okay. We're here for you if you need anything. And it was each individually, putting really your money where your mouth is, which is what John just said, is it ultimately comes down to trying to have the best outcome we possibly can for our patients. And then we just rescheduled it, and now that we're able to do it tonight. And I thought that was just a really great example of what you just said about supporting one another. through this very difficult career and life that we've chosen. And so, you know, that's a great example of how you did that. So thank you to you all. And Pat, you're up.
Yeah, I'll just add to, I have nothing to add to this except sometimes you forget, and I think I've been doing a lot of travel during my presidency and even over the past couple of months traveling a lot. And every time I get on a podium to discuss a clinical issue, I realize the significance of the impact that SAGES has worldwide and how important the work that we do is in every issue, every threat to surgeons and our patients right now that are evolving. We have such a significant role to play. You know, whether it's, and I think you think of technology, you think of SAGES fund innovation, but the bottom line is all this innovation flooding our markets, our patients, our hospitals. You know, SAGES plays a critical role in triaging and educating our surgeons how to use them, and the role of a safe adoption of new technologies. And never more than now, I think we're under this incredible threat with all this robotic platform coming along. And the number one question I get is, what is SAGES going to do? You know, how is SAGES going to take a leadership role in educating us and telling us how to choose and decide through these platforms and how to protect our patients from harm? So this is just one example of why our society's work is so important. Patient trust, addressing inequities in surgical care, knowing that those gaps are continue to deepen. And, you know, what is SAGES going to be doing about this? How are we going to continue raising the alarm on those disparities and making sure that we provide equitable care to all our patients, regardless of their race, gender, or you know, all those metrics. So this is the kind of work that I think we have been doing and we need to continue doubling down on. Sustainability hit me in the face. I mean, I think we all kind of woke up and said, oh my God, you know, what are the repercussions of what we do surgically every day, but also with all these technologies, what is the impact on the environment? And everybody else is thinking about this except for us. We're late to the game, but we need to really, you know, start playing an important role. And so I'm really proud of the work that our society is doing in that space. And again, we, you know, this is a lot of questions from a lot of people when we travel is, what is SAGES doing? We're leading in that space. No one else is doing what we're doing right now. And it's really important. And of course, you know, I can't talk about the future of the society without referring to the work that Liane and John and Hoarcio have done before. All of us is, you know, education and training. And again, the challenges of training now is bigger than ever, and really supporting our residents. And again, SAGES is a leader in that space. But, you know, you talk about future of surgery in our societies, and we have a lot of work to do. We have so much to accomplish. And so we need to kind of, you know, keep our eyes on the game, because whether it's patients, you know, worldwide, and I'm not even touching on the impact we're having on global surgery and other countries that are benefiting from our products. So we have to stay focused on the mission of providing the best possible care and education to our trainees and and the best care to our patients.
I think that was such a great summary, and it really is truly how I felt about SAGES when I joined as a resident. And I think one of the reasons it was my favorite society and I became an MIS surgeon is it's just so inspiring to think about, you know, what you can do to continue to innovate and lead and change surgery for the better. So it's really great to hear everyone echo that. So this actually segues really well to our next segment. And so it's something that we recently added to the show, and it's called the SAGES Committee Spotlight. So for this, we want to highlight and hear from a committee leader about what's going on with their current committee. So today we thought, since we had Pat on the show, you could share a little bit about one of the newer task forces in SAGES, which is the Patient Engagement Task Force. So please tell us a little bit about what's happening in the task force. We'd love to learn more about it.
Yeah, it's the same thing. So I think, you know, you've heard me all talk about patient, but the fact that we've been, obviously everything we do is centered on patients, but we kind of forgot a little bit that we need to kind of include patients more actively in our activities. And so the patient engagement task force is essentially pretty much as a representative from every committee, especially all the committees that have, you know, that develop educational material, that create content. But also the research committee, for example, has representation. And so the task is, how do we integrate the patient voice in everything we do? We had a little bit of a flavor of that at the annual meeting. We had 5 patient representatives who actually came, and they were peppering our sessions at the annual meeting, and that was really well received. The patients loved it. They love being included in those debate sessions, and And the audience really responded incredibly well. We had a chance to debrief with the patients to get their feedback, and they were really engaged. And these are our personal patients. Imagine, what else we can do when we start engaging patients worldwide, to really join us in our efforts to develop the best possible patient education material, and how we engage them in even our research topics. What should we be focused on? We have lots of research. We go through this process of PICO questions and what's important, what's clinically relevant to us, but this is just our perspective. Imagine where we can go when we start engaging patients on what really matters to them, what outcomes are important to them, not just our, metrics of success, but what does success look like from a patient perspective. So we're doing the work right now. This is the probably the not so sexy part of the task force, is to define SOPs. How do we engage with patients? How do we identify patients? How do we vet patients to participate? What are the what are the terms of engagement? What do they get in return? Based on how much they contribute to the different activities. How do we keep them to the fold? How do we keep them engaged? And then how we kind of define these relationships with the patients. So we're doing all of that sort of basic work, and which activities and how, but I'm super excited. I mean, the excitement, just all the people participating, from community practice to HPBA, everybody's on board, reflecting on how we will do that work and really enrich everything we do as an organization with having patients firmly engaged in, part of our society. In a nutshell.
I mean, it's been a super impactful task force. Being part of it and just seeing the work has been truly inspiring. And I think it's going to yield a lot of great stuff in the future. So now we are going to wrap up, but before we do so, I did want to let each of you maybe share a little bit about, anything else in your journey that, as you were talking through, that you would want to share about your experience as a past president of SAGES. So any final thoughts from each of you?
Well, I want to thank you both for, I think this is a great addition to SAGES. I love the podcast. I was listening to it in the car. I mean, I'm a bit of a, it's a little bit nerdy, I guess, to do driving, and I'm not listening to music. I'm not even listening to the daily. I'm listening to SAGES stories, and not even on one-time speed. I'm not even doing what my kids do and listening to their classes at 2x speed. But so I want to congratulate both of you, Kevin and Jenny, and Sharinda obviously did a great job getting it off the ground. I really enjoy it, and I want to just say keep up the great work.
I'll just echo and say, this kind of thing is the relational glue that holds a community together. And, even just the opportunity, like you've given me a lot of joy tonight, just sitting here looking at the faces on the screen. These are dear people who I've learned a ton from and have become really special friends. To create vehicles where we get to do that together at every level in the society, at every, career and other level of function. I'm thinking of the community practice group, for example, as another example of something where I think SAGES has realized in recent years. We wanted to create an environment where the majority of our membership, who aren't in necessarily traditional academic roles, like so many of us that get to serve in some of the leadership roles, at least historically, have been creating those kind of things, which I agree with Liane, you're doing through these efforts is really rich, and it's part of what sustains a society. So thank you.
Yeah, I guess I just want to echo the thank yous. And there's two groups that we have to emphasize the thank you that maybe we haven't mentioned enough tonight. One is the SAGES staff that has guided us to be presidents in many ways, Sally Matthews and all her staff. Then and staff that are here tonight, that are behind the scenes and are going to make this possible, as Jason. And then obviously, but we don't mention it enough, our families, our loved ones, that have understood what is SAGES for us, the love that we have for SAGES and this type of relationships, and have put up with that, because a lot of our times have been dedicated to this. Then cheers to our families, cheers to our loved ones, cheers to the SAGES staff.
I don't know how to top that, except, I mean, I think just because I just came off from Precision's presidency, I have probably a more acute sense of gratitude and still overwhelmed by an unbelievable year. It's like you come off the presidency and you're like, you find yourself going like, what's, you right, Liane? Like, what's going on? Like, you feel like you're going in circles in your office, and you're like, I should be doing something. I can't put my finger on it. Something's missing. And you're like, you're missing the calls and, you know, the urgent reflections and the, you know, it's just a little bit overwhelming in the beginning, but I'm enjoying the coming off phase. But I cannot emphasize, you know, what's the SAGES family and the structure, the framework is absolutely incredible, and the work that goes on is you can't even imagine. And you get a glimpse of that when you're president. I agree, especially those of us who kind of like to know what's going on behind the scene. And you hop onto all those committees and you get on as many Zoom meetings as possible, and you just realize the sheer joy of the work being done, and members are doing this for free day in and day out. I mean, I just saw sustainability trying to keep up with everyone else, but they were meeting literally, we had to tell them to stop meeting. They were meeting every other week for like 2 hours. I was like, guys, you need to slow down. It's like, it's going to be okay. But they were so frantically focused on trying to catch up with all the other committees and deliver. And that's exactly what SAGES does, is they have so much to do and so much to say. And the staff, I don't know how they do it. SAGES staff is able to keep up with all of this and continue to grow. So we're just incredibly grateful for everything. And thank you for the chance to share our thoughts. And it's cathartic. Thank you for that.
Well, I want to thank you all so much for your time and your wisdom tonight. I think I speak for both Kevin and I when I say it's been a real privilege to talk to all of you about your tenure as president. So I really hope this episode will serve as inspiration for all SAGES members out there who are looking to make an impact and change in surgery. I really can't wait to see what the future of SAGES is going to look like.
Thank you so much, everyone.
Thank you, you guys. Awesome.
And that wraps up today's episode of SAGES Stories. You can view the show notes for any links to sites we referenced today. Visit sages.org for membership information and for the most recent news from our society. Follow us on Twitter at @sages_updates. Make sure you hit the like button and subscribe so you don't miss any future episodes. See you again next time, and remember, you can't spell minimally invasive surgery without SAGES.